Hello, welcome, 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 welcome. Okay, so you may have noticed we have the desks in a very strange formation today. This was sort of a test we're doing, an experiment. Basically, the speakers were a little unhappy to be addressing people who were looking the opposite direction, speaking to the back of their heads, so to speak, literally. So we are trying this new format, and we'd appreciate if you could all help us with that. If you cannot see me right now, hello, you folks, yes, so please relocate. That way we can all maintain a direct line of sight with the speaker. We're talking about other options, like maybe a no laptop rule, but I don't think that's necessary. I think this will work, but we're going to explore all our options. As you folks are working very hard on this class, or in this class, we're working very hard on the course. On that note, we are going to be requiring mid-quarter feedback tonight. So you don't have to, we're going to send out the form tonight, and we'd like you to fill it out within the next week. Hopefully other classes are doing this as well, to get feedback on how they can improve. And basically it's going to be a survey with some multiple choice, some short response, asking how we're doing so far and how we can better suit and provide for all the students in this class. A reminder, the big question will be at the end of the class, but you probably know that at this point. Okay, and then for CS146, I would like to talk about the symposium we held. This was the office hours on Sunday. So by a show of hands, who attended this office hours? Okay, and who thinks it's a good idea? Who would go again? Okay, all right, okay, so we'll have to discuss this. It's a smaller contingent than I would have liked, but I think it could still be a valuable resource, and it's something that we're thinking about. If you have other ideas or feedback on how we can improve, definitely put that in the survey, because we want to know what you need and how we can best assist you. Other notes are the A5 and proposal are due very soon. I believe that's tomorrow night. And speak with us if you haven't already gotten your dual-purpose design approved, because a bunch of people got a little stuck on that in the past. Also diegetic design, and we'd be happy to troubleshoot that so that maybe a confusion now is not reflected on the midterm evaluation. Also very helpful is the format of the dual-purpose design. So I have a very specific sentence structure which I'd like students to use, which is inside the assignment. So please make sure when you're filling out the assignment, you address that sentence structure, because I think it will help identify some problems that may be present within the design. Is anyone assigned? Okay, and if you have if you're going to enter the final project with a different team than was assigned to you for assignment 5, maybe someone dropped, or maybe you decided you want to pursue this project with a different team, please see me after class, because we're going to be setting up the TAs with respect to the assignment 5 groups, and if those groups change, we need to know before Thursday. Okay, now it's time for diamonds. TAs, who chose these? Please tell us why.
Talk about the first one. The one you see in the top left is a game with a little mouse and a clock. And basically the mechanic was that if you hold a button, time rewinds. So you see that, and it was really elegant because the gears in this clock all go in one direction when time is going forward, and then go backwards when time is going backwards. And so it was really cool, just like game to play. And
awesome. And do we have the TA who selected this one? The Bullet Heaven? Present? No?
no.
Okay. Did one of the TAs play this game and can speak to it? Okay, well I interacted with this game a little bit. I thought it was a really awesome experience in sort of nailing the moment-to-moment controls. It had very sort of tight reaction times, and it provided a pretty cool twist on what's normally the bullet hell system. And I think they also had a very good risk-reward strategy with respect to either getting close to gain the power-ups of attacking the enemies versus trying to escape and avoid the bullets at the same time. So it was a pretty compelling design. And again, we don't expect every assignment to be at this level. We just want to highlight the students who did put in the extra work to make something that stood out. Okay, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about two of my favorite books, Peopleware and Flow. Peopleware by Tom DeMarco and Tommy Lister, Flow by Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. Both of these books talk about very similar topics. In Flow, Mikhail, he calls it flow, which is basically the state of being always in the perfect amount of difficulty. Peopleware addresses the topic, same topic, but in a different perspective. They call it gel, which is your ability to work well with teams when you're in that state of the perfect amount of difficulty. And today, instead of case studies, I just wanted to read you a chapter from this book. It's a very short chapter. It's actually a short story, a parable, in fact, which means it's sort of a fictitious story, a little fantasy, but there's something I think that can be learned about working with teams, certainly relevant as we prepare for what will be a 5-week project for CS146. So, I'm going to read you a short story. Picture yourself a game developer who's just assigned to a new project. You know the manager and most of the other project personnel by name, but that's about it. Your first day on the new project is next Monday. And during the week before that Monday, you get a call from your boss-to-be. She's having a get-together, and she says, for the people of the new project, she wants them to all come over her place during the weekend for a dinner with the rest of the team. You're free, and you want to meet the new group, so you accept. When you arrive, the whole group is sitting around the living room drinking beer and telling war stories about the very difficult assignments, projects, that preceded this one. You join in and talk about a few projects you made, and everybody has another beer. You begin to wonder about food, and there is no smell of anything cooking or sign of anyone working in the kitchen. Finally, your boss-to-be admits that she hasn't had time to make dinner and suggests the whole crew walk over to a nearby supermarket and assemble the makings of a meal. I guess we can be capable of putting together a spaghetti dinner. A spaghetti dinner, she says. So, off you go. In the supermarket, you go as a group through the aisles, and nobody takes charge. Dinner seems to be the last thing on your boss's mind. She chats and laughs and offers up a funny story about Baden Health Center, and in spite of a general lack of direction, some things do get thrown into the cart. One fellow has already gotten the salad pretty well taken care of, and there is some talk of making a clam sauce when nobody's opposed. 2 of your teammates talk out the details. You decide to make your patented garlic bread, and someone else picks up a bottle of wine. Finally, there is a consensus that enough stuff is in the cart for dinner, and you head back to the ranch. You settle down your bags of groceries, the boss grabs another beer and tells about this really dope dual-purpose design that she's been thinking of, and little by little the party gravitates towards the kitchen, where you begin preparations for the meal. Your boss gives no direction, but she pitches in to chop onions at someone's suggestion. You start the garlic olive oil simmering in the pan, and there is a sauce bubbling and some spaghetti boiling. Gradually a dinner comes together, and you eat until you're full and share in the cleanup chores. The end. Something I think that's important to think about, whether you're working on CS146 or some other group project, is what your first success as a team will be. Maybe it's not getting together for a night of dinner, though that's probably a good idea. But you should consider basically what the first milestone that you're going to achieve is going to be in this project. And if it's kind of far out, maybe there's a way to set a milestone for yourself earlier. That way you can sort of establish a velocity, get over that project together, and have some sort of collective success you can look to know that you're going to get through what will be greater challenges forward on. Even if it's just a small checkpoint, it can have a big impact on helping your team working well together. Okay, now we'll introduce our speaker.
Okay, today everyone, we have Caryl from Double Fine Productions in San Francisco visiting. Prior to working at Double Fine, she was at some large companies like EA, Maxis, Amazon, and also spent time at smaller companies like Telltale and Gmoko. Her focus has commonly been on team management and growth, game production, QA management, and promoting diversity within the games industry. She's also spoken a number of times at international events on topics like running a live mobile game, changing the role of game production in development, and also putting user-generated content into video games. Please welcome Caryl Shaw.
So hi, instead of talking about how awesome things are when you have your first success working with your team, I'm going to actually talk about everything that can go wrong when you're making a video game. It might not be the most optimistic talk, but I will try and give you some solutions and ways to think about developing methodologies that will allow you to get past the problems that you have and hopefully make a great game. So I'm going to talk for 2 seconds about who I am, mostly around the games that I've made since you got an intro about who I am already. I'm going to talk about what production is, because I've definitely had people come up to me and not understand that. I've worked with a number of engineers who thought production was useless because they didn't really understand what we did. There's some studios like Bungie up in Seattle, they don't even have producers, they don't use them. But I think they're important, and we're going to talk about why that is. I'm going to talk about 5 big problems I've seen in my career, and then I'm going to talk about one special secret problem at the end, and there's some fun that we're going to have with that, I hope. So pay attention. There's something that's going to come up in the very last slide before we do QA, and I'm going to have a question for you about something I talked about in the talk. We're also going to talk about how to mitigate problems and work around them. So there's a lot of things you can do when you're managing a project. There's a lot of levers you can pull to make changes in order to get to your goals. All right, so first off, I did work on a bunch of big games at EA. So these were AAA games. So these were big budgets, big teams, hundreds of people, multiple studios. I worked on some little games. These were free-to-play mobile games, of which I am now extremely cynical about them. So if you ever want to talk about why I'm cynical about mobile games, we can reach out to me. Happy to give you my email address. I worked on a bunch of games at Telltale, which just recently went out of business. So I learned a lot about poor management, and we'll talk about some of the problems that I saw there as to why that company no longer exists today. And then I worked on Lumberyard, which is a game engine. So I got to understand sort of the nuts and bolts of like how the technology works. And now I'm working at Double Fine, where we make small indie creative games. And I'm the vice president of development there, which means I run the studio. So all of the people that make the games roll up to me. I've mostly been an executive producer in my career, which means mostly I've just been in charge for a long time, and I've been in games for 15 years. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's move right into what production is. So this slide, you guys can all see it because there's a bunch of TVs. This is awesome. So when the engineer that asked me, they said, production's useless, and I don't think you even have a purpose. Why are you even here? Why do you even come to work? And I was like, you know what? Let's go to lunch, and let's talk about why I come to work. And the first thing I asked him was like, hey, do you like getting paid? And he was like, yeah, in fact, I do like getting paid. Well, that's good. You should listen to your producers, because that's the one thing they worry about. You will rarely find an engineer who's sitting there wondering, like, how can we make more money on our project? And they don't really think about who is worrying about that. But production needs to worry about that, and they need to think about how we're spending that money and whether we're spending it in the right places. It's also production's job to worry about, like, what are people working on? Are they working on the right things? So if they're not working on the right things, you're going to run into problems. I liked your story because it is about, is everybody working well together? That's a super important part of game development. Does everybody have the tools they need to do their job? So part of holding the purse strings and managing the budget means you decide which tools you're going to buy. So if you have a free engine or an engine that costs money, you have to evaluate, is the engine that costs money worth the money that you're going to pay for it? And you have to think about those things, because maybe it's the tool you need, but maybe you can't afford it. So production makes a lot of those decisions, makes a lot of those recommendations. Excuse me. Are we going to be on time? You guys have a 5-week project coming up. That's not a lot of time, so you're going to need to learn how to manage that time. And production is what worries about time. Do we have enough time to do what we want to do? And are we going to meet the vision of the game in that time? And that's going to be something that plays into almost every one of the problems that I'm going to talk about. Let's jump into the problems. Problem 1, and I've actually run into this, it's really terrible. You run out of money before the game is done. Or at least you know you will. So you're sitting in a meeting, you're going over stuff with the team, you look back at your budget, you realize that there was a miscalculation at some point, or something slipped, and you're going to actually run out of money 2 months before the game is set to submit for approval with Sony. That's not a good thing to have happen. It can happen because your staffing costs are too high. We'll talk about some of the samples of like what staffing costs look like here in the Bay Area. Your game scope overextends your available resources. Your designers made a game that you can't possibly make with the team that you have. Other types of cost overruns. You might have to buy software and hardware. Say you're working with somebody and they say, hey, we really think it should be on both PlayStation and Xbox, but all you budgeted for was for a PlayStation. So you have a bunch of dev kits for PlayStation, but you don't have any Xbox dev kits. And those are like, I don't know, like $12,000 a dev kit they used to be. I think they're a little cheaper now. That can be a fairly substantial amount of money that you have to buy those kits so that you can actually do the work. Outsourcing versus internal development costs. Sometimes outsourcing is a way to save money, and sometimes it's really not a way to save money, and it's a really interesting place where cost overruns happen. Because if outsourcing doesn't go well, you still have to pay them. You have to try and get the work out of them you want, but it may not work out that well, and you still are going to need to pay them and still do the work. So there's a lot of ways that you can run into problems financing your game. Here's a really basic way to think about how to calculate staffing costs. So think about the number of person months over the lifetime of the project. So for the example I'm going to use today, you're going to have 10 people on your team, and it's going to be a 12-month project, which is a fairly small game. That's not a AAA game. It might be a AA game. Chances are it's more of an indie game. Maybe sort of a larger indie game. You need to know the average monthly salary plus benefits for your staff. So you take everybody's salary, you add all the benefits to it that you need to, like you want to give them health care, you want to make sure they have vacation. All of that needs to go into a fund, and you need to figure out what the average amount per employee is. You need to figure out the total months on the project, which we know is 12, and then you need to figure out what your overhead is. So you're going to have insurance and legal and finance costs. You're going to have incidentals, like all of the additional software you need to get for the game. You're going to have rent. You're going to need to pay rent and your internet charge. Anybody know how much internet costs for a company of like 60 people? $2,500 a month. So, you need to come up with that. It's going to be slightly smaller for your project, but you're still going to need to have that money every month. That never changes. You're always going to have a monthly overhead. So say we take those 10 employees and we have 120 person months for our game. That's how much resources we need to make our game. The gross salaries for the Bay Area, I kind of took some averages and I figured out what do some artists make and engineers. If you put them all together and you divide it up, it's about $85,000 per person. So that's like $85,000 per person to have them working for 12 months in your company. And your monthly overhead is probably going to be about $25,000, and that includes your rent. So you end up with a project that for a year is going to cost you $1.15 million. That is, in fact, a lot of money, and very few people have it just kind of sitting around waiting to make their dream video game. So it is easy to run out of money, because you might start that project thinking, I have $400,000 and I can get started on it, and then we'll figure out the rest later. And lots of companies do that, but lots of companies run out of money and don't end up finishing their game. So your monthly burn rate in this case is going to be about $95,000, which every month you're going to have that much in bills to pay. So you can sit, when you are looking at it, saying when do I know I have a problem? Well, you have to figure out sort of what your safety net is there. If you know you can go out and get some more money when you're down to $300,000 in your bank account, that's when you need to start thinking about how long is it going to take you to get that extra funding for your game, because you've got about 3 months left. So there's a lot of strategies for budgeting, and I encourage you, in even a small game project, think about what it was like if you were paying yourself and paying for all this stuff, and go through the practice of making a budget. If you're doing a 5-week project, think about what it would actually cost you to do that and build yourself a budget. You will learn more about the experience of what that means and how to be aware of the money and the financial part of it by doing that. The other stuff is going to be for bigger businesses. You'll want QuickBooks. You'll want to have some sort of a financial advisor and CFO if you get big enough. The last two are actually pretty important. One is tracking your actuals. So it's really easy to stop caring about what you're spending money on and just putting the budget together at the beginning and then never paying attention to it again. But if you want to be able to do accurate planning, you actually need to go back and track your actuals against what you said they were going to be, because often you'll find that's where your cost overruns happen. You just don't notice. You don't notice that the outsourcer that you hired went over by $25,000, and now you can't pay. That was your rent for last month. And then sticking to your budget. As a producer, you're going to have to learn to say no. You're going to have to learn to be the person in the room who who wears the black hat and says no when people ask for things, like they want some custom fonts designed for the game. Like they need new glyphs in like 15 languages. You have to be like, that's ridiculous. We don't need that. Except you can't say that because you want them to like you and you want to be able to make a game with them and have them feel like you hear them. So how do you fix it? So here's the 3 areas, and you'll see this all over game design. You can have something great, cheap, or fast, but you really can't have all 3 of them. Usually you can pick like 1.5 to 2 in a small project. You can cut your cost, you can raise more money, or you can cut your scope so that your project size fits in the amount of time you have. And when do you fix this kind of problem? When does problem 1 get fixed? All throughout the project. If you're not watching your bank account and watching the money that you have for your game, you will run into problems very early, and they will be very bad, and it will hurt your game being able to be completed. So, that's problem 1, and that is like the worst problem. So we did the hardest one and the worst problem first. The second one is your team does not actually work together well. And this happens because you get people from all over. My company now focuses really hard on having a diverse staff, which is great because we get really diverse characters in our games, and we have a lot of voices, and it's a really interesting experience. But we also have a lot of different people who grew up with different backgrounds, who argue in different ways, and have different ways of communicating in different communication styles. And that means that, there's going to be some oil and water going on, and you have to learn how to manage that. Because having a good team dynamic is one of the most important things to making a good game. Because if you're not having fun making a game, your game probably won't be very fun. So challenging team dynamics can be a couple of different things. It can be internal. It can be within your team, within your group. It can be with external partners. We work with a lot of publishers. So publishers often will give you money to make a game, and then they will take a large cut of the profits from the game. And if you don't get along with your publisher, that is a very difficult situation to be in because they need to sign your milestones and give you money. So you want that relationship to be a strong one. It could be a professional relationship. So maybe 2 of the people really just don't like each other's work style. Like somebody doesn't want to come in the morning, they come in late, they stay late. The other person is like, I'm a morning person and I've got kids, I leave at 5. Those 2 folks might have some problems working together because they can't find the time they need to work on the project together. And it could be personal. Like sometimes you just don't really get along with people. And you have to solve for those problems as well, because that just happens when you have a job, as I'm sure it happens when you take a class. It could be solvable. Like you can try and solve it. And as the producer, you should try and solve it. But it also could require you to restructure your team. So if you have a couple of different level teams, one of the level teams isn't getting along very well, and the other team is more flexible, maybe you want to move some people around and try a different team dynamic. Some of the use cases, these are some groups I've seen not get along, and mostly it's because they just come at game development from such a different place. So designers and QA come from designers like, I'm going to think big, I'm going to make big things, it's going to be awesome, it's all procedural, and you can have a million permutations, and QA is like, a million permutations, I'm never going home again. And then that whole conversation is going to be a challenging conversation that as the producer, you're going to need to broker that conversation and find some kind of middle ground. Artists and engineers are also sort of notoriously at loggerheads a lot of times because engineers want something that's very clearly defined. They want it defined up front, and art is more of a developing process. So, a lot of times you can't nail down what you want in a specific piece of art until you get it in the game. And if you can't get it in the game because the engineer hasn't done his job yet, you kind of run into some problems there where you just need to find, like, how do we do this at least once? So, a good way to solve a problem between an artist and engineer is, like, build a prototype or do a pilot to see if you can make something work, and finding a way to get them in line with each other. It becomes a problem if your leads don't get along. So, say I was the head of a product and I had a creative lead and a technical lead, and they just didn't agree. They just thought that, one of them thought the game should be one way, and the other one thought the game should be something completely different. That is going to be your job to broker that and to figure out a way to come to a solution that holds true to the vision of the game, but also allows the game to get done, because you need both of those people to believe in the process. And then you throw in marketing and publishing, and those are also folks that are going to have opinions and personalities and really different priorities. And you need to figure out how to be the barrier and be somebody who protects your team from a lot of decisions that might be not that relevant to the game development, but are going to be important in order to sell the game later on, or to recoup the money to pay back the publisher. There's a lot of great solutions out. There's a lot of good talks from GDC in the Vault. There's a lot of interesting books you can read. But you're going to need to learn how to solve for team dynamics. Having regular one-on-ones with your staff, and including your teams to have regular one-on-ones with their staff, is a key to helping maintain a kind of transparency so that people understand what the other person's experience is and what they're going through, and being able to help make sure that the project is on track and being planned adequately. You can always recommend books, for you or your team. I can get you guys a list of books if you're interested. There were a couple you recommended. But exploring different communication styles is something that's a really important thing to do, because artists and engineers do communicate differently. How to have difficult conversations. I found in game development that there's a sort of high percentage of introverts, which is hard for me because I am a textbook extrovert. I can talk to anybody. I love going to parties. I feed off of large groups of people, and I've met tons of introverts, and I thought they should all behave like me, but in fact they don't need to, and I should be more respectful of them and learn how to listen to them, and how to have those difficult conversations with somebody who is a completely different personality type than you is an important skill for any team member to have. So that's a really important one to learn how to do. If somebody is not performing, as a producer, one of your jobs is going to be to put some sort of plan in place to let them know that their job is on the line and that they need to sort of hit some marks in order to keep their job and be able to continue on your team. And that's really one of the hardest things you have to do, is go to somebody and say, your work isn't good enough. I think that you can get there, but we're going to put a plan in place, and if you don't get there, you're going to be fired. Firing people is another job that producers do, and that is kind of the last-ditch effort. But performance improvement plans are another tool that you'll have. Handle it like a boss. You're the boss. The producer is usually the person who's managing other people and managing the project. You need to negotiate people's differences, but you can't really take sides. So you might think that a cell shader is the most important thing for the art direction for the game, but if the engineer tells you it's too hard to implement, you need to look at both those sides and figure out a way to broker a decision there, or broker a discussion there. Encourage practical solutions. A lot of what I'm going to say today is common sense, and that's a lot of what production is coming up with practical solutions, but remain aware of the entire scope of the project. That is your job, to be aware of everything that's going on the project. Be empathetic. Try and understand what the team is going through. Is somebody having personal problems? Is somebody having professional problems? Is somebody just stuck in their job and unhappy? But don't forget that you need to be the person who does come up and make the final decision at the end of the day. And you're also going to be a bridge and kind of a human shield to the team. A lot of times you're going to end up being the person that has to protect your team and give them the space to do the work that's going to make them great and make the game great. And so you're going to be the person that coordinates with other departments and delivers those messages. Okay, they asked me to do a QA session in the middle, so that's now.
How do you balance being the boss and feeling like you could potentially fire someone for performance issues, but also trying to build a close-knit team where they trust each other and they're willing to fail and they're willing to do their best, but also not hide things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a level of transparency that you get to where you don't tell everything that's going on, but you share enough of what's going on so that everyone is aware of what their role is and what's important for them to be doing. I think when it comes to firing people and performance problems, a lot of times it's because there's some underlying problem. So maybe somebody has a personal problem or a health problem, or they were hired for a job they aren't qualified to do. And those are all things that, you know, I mean, it can also be like somebody is an asshole and they just don't do a good job and they don't care and they don't come to work. You know, if there's a reason for something, you should be the person exploring that and understanding that and trying to work with it. So oftentimes people don't come back from PIPs and they do get fired, but some percentage, in my experience, it's been about 30%, do come back and get, you know, I can work with them enough and give them a clear enough goal that they can achieve that and become a contributing member of the team. And that is a win for everybody. But if somebody is not performing on a team, firing them could be one of the best things you do for your team. And you just, again, have to kind of be the grown-up and make that decision. And you're going to work with other people about it. You're going to work with other leads and get their opinions. You're going to work with the peers of the person who's having the problem. So it's not, doesn't happen in a vacuum. And there should be a general transparency and awareness around trying to help that person find their way back to the team dynamic.
When you're resolving kind of issues between team members, I gotta assume that one of the main mechanisms is playtesting and just how people feel about the game, but another one is probably collecting data from users if the game's already released or just previous games. What are the main mechanisms that you've encountered, and are there others, and like how do you try to go about resolving just something that's fundamentally just a disagreement between two team members on how the game should go?
I mean, there's not a lot of data you're going to get about, you know, why team members don't get along. I guess is the question more about, like, the team members are disagreeing about something they should do with the game?
Yeah, it's more around, like, the game itself. Not necessarily any interpersonal dynamic issues, but just how do you resolve those kinds of disagreements?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one, because that's really understanding, you know, to me, what I would do would be sit back and try and understand what is the vision for the game, and is this problem that's causing this dilemma between these two employees, that, you know, does it have to do with the vision of the game? Does it have to do with the vision, or does it have to do with the implementation? So those are going to be two sort of different discussions you're going to have with them. If it's the vision, you know, you're almost going to always default to the designer, or the lead, the creative lead on the project. If it's the implementation, you are going to typically be able to draw some data out of something. It might be playtesting. It might be you playing the game as a third-party neutral participant, and understanding, you know, which is the best avenue that we should go down. But ultimately, you're going to have that conversation with them. And again, it's going to come down to, like, you know, are you their manager? If you are, you're going to have that conversation. If you're not their manager should have that conversation with them. If it's a dilemma between two folks and they're having some disagreement about the implementation of the game, you just got to get them in a room and get them to talk to each other. If they're not already doing that, you might encourage them to talk to each other before you get them into a room. But you're going to be the broker of those discussions to try and come to some resolution where everybody comes away feeling like they're making the right decision, even if it's not the one they wanted. That make sense?
So in, like, our class, for example, like, we don't have a producer, or technically someone who's like over everyone else. So how do you recommend we resolve conflicts when, like, four people who are equal, like, have differing opinions about the game?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully with 4 people, you're just all talking to each other a lot anyways. And if you have conflicts between 4 people, if all 4 of you disagrees, that's going to be a problem. If 3 of you disagrees and one person's like, I don't know, I don't have a strong opinion about it, maybe they become the arbiter, and they, you know, sort of take a neutral chair in a discussion around it. You know, I think that there's a lot of different books you can read about sort of cooperative development. A lot of indie games are really small. They're, you know, they can be anywhere from like 2 to 8 people, and I think that in those cases, you have to kind of come to some kinds of agreements, and it just takes longer and takes more discussion. So, you know, it can happen. It's just harder. You can also tell somebody, so you have a 5-week project, right? So make somebody the producer of the week, you know, as part of their job. So you're all probably wearing multiple hats, because there's not a way you're going to make a game with only 5 people, you know, 5 weeks with 4 people, unless you're doing multiple jobs. So make it one of the jobs, that you have that you assign out to people and then trade it off so that everybody gets a chance to do it. And then they become that person for that week. And it's like, it's your job this week to be the arbiter for decision making. And you're not going to make the decisions all the time, but you're going to negotiate them. So, yeah, that's not a bad idea. I mean, that way everybody sort of sees what production does, which I think is a good thing. I started by building stuff. So I built websites in all through the '90s, just as a a monkey. Like I was a web monkey. I built HTML and CSS and JavaScript in the first .com, and then when after the .com, after it like kind of died, I took a little bit of time off, and when I came back, I really wanted to go into video games, and I found a job at Maxis doing the website and managing the website, and that morphed into a production job doing all the online content. So my first 6 or 7 years in the games industry, all I did was online stuff, and that just grew out of it. Plus, I just had always managed people. So before I did technology, I was a cook, and I worked in restaurants, and I just managed people, and I managed a line. So I was a grill cook, and I would call out orders and make sure everything came out on time and tasted delicious, kind of like a video game. And when I did that, I was always telling people what to do and kind of keeping things organized and making sure that the plan was right. And it just was a very natural fit for me. I like wearing lots of different hats, so I like talking to lots of people, and I like being someone who knows what's going on. And I've always liked that since I was a little kid. Just kind of like knowing what's next and knowing what we have to get done and knowing how to get there was always really important to me. Much more important than like I'm a terrible artist. I took a bunch of engineering courses and didn't have the patience for being an engineer. Like, more power to engineers that they can sit there and engineer all day long. So, yeah, it was just a really good fit for me. Loud.
I'm just trying to think of a parallel from like a non-gaming company. So
Can you speak a little bit louder?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm just trying to think of like a parallel from a non-gaming company in terms of what type of role yours is. So is it more like a product manager or a project manager, like a TPM?
So, yeah, I was at Amazon. I was a TPM, so I was a technical program manager, and I managed sprints and schedules and all of that. Video game production is not. I haven't found the parallel,
Okay.
and it's because it's sort of one part scheduling, but also sort of one part like keeping an eye on that vision and understanding the creative side of things. The group that I worked with at Electronic Arts had a production mentality that was, you were a producer, but you also like maybe spent 20% of your time thinking about design. Other companies have producers and even other companies within EA, even other studios within EA have producers who are, 80% producer and 20% just technical management. And it just is it's a really weird, different kind of field. And I think it's really good for people who, didn't necessarily study game development. Like, I think the people I've met that are the best producers tend to come from, like, liberal arts backgrounds, or, like, I've met some cartographers. Like, that's an interesting one. I've met a couple map makers that are like, yeah, production, that's where I ended up. It seems great. I've met some engineers who just didn't want to be engineers, and they moved into it because they wanted that creative side of things. And then you get really organized people who are things that they're like, I want to be a localization producer because I'm interested in language and thinking about how people from different parts of the world might play my game. And so there's a lot of different components, and it's not really like if you go apply at an Amazon or a Facebook or a Google, like they won't understand what a video game producer is. It's because it's not product management, because you're not measuring user engagement in the same way that you would for a company like that. It's really weird. It's a weird position. Probably not helpful.
I was just wondering, how do you go about solving and sort of preempting problems before they sort of start damaging the project or becoming costly? You talked a lot about solving arguments, like once they're sort of already out in the air.
Yep.
How do you solve something like maybe two people aren't communicating? Like, how do you spot that
they kind of are asking a couple of different things. So, if I understand you right, one is how do you sort of preemptively solve for people who aren't getting along, but also how do you solve for problems that you see in the project before they happen? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one of how do you solve problems for, for people that are having problems. I talked a little about that. I think that preemptively you can look out and sort of understand, once you start getting to know people, like it's really good if you take or read some psychology textbooks and learn a little about psychology of people, because people's relationships are what you want to be looking out for. And again, like I'll take extrovert and introvert because it's just the easiest one to sort of see the difference between two people, but there's a million differences between people. But if you can be like, that person's an introvert, that person's an extrovert, and the extrovert is really like obnoxiously extroverted, the introvert's going to be turned off by that, and you can probably see that before that becomes an issue. And do some things around that. Maybe you sit down with the extrovert and have a beer with them and say, hey, look, if you keep bothering Bob, he is eventually going to snap, and that probably won't be great. Maybe you should like think about different types of personalities, like try and get that person to understand that there are different personalities and that theirs is somewhat strong. And encourage, Bob, who's the introvert, to speak in meetings. Like, don't do it in a way, like come to him after the meeting and say, I noticed you were really quiet. Do you have anything to say? And he's like, oh, well, Sam drove me nuts and I don't know what to do about it, but I have this great idea and I'd love to present it to Sam. Then you can start brokering some of those things. So it's about the relationships you build to understand how you're going to solve those types of problems. Some of the other stuff I'm going to cover a little bit in the back half in the problems 3, 4, and 5. So if I don't answer the second half of your question, come back and ask me again at the end. Good? Okay, we'll do some more questions at the end, and I don't have to go anywhere, so I can stay around and answer questions if you guys have any. 30 minutes, perfect. All right, problem 3. This is something I just went through at Double Fine, because I joined the company a couple years ago, and we could not fill positions for Psychonauts 2 fast enough. We were unable to do that. It was really hard to hire people. We are a small, creatively driven, not very rich independent game company in like the most expensive city where Twitter, Facebook, and Google all also live. So we have a lot of competition for hiring, and we don't pay anywhere near like what Google pays. Like I can't compete against that. We compete by being a really interesting, creative environment, but it makes it really, really hard to hire folks. In general, recruiting, from what I've seen in my whole career, is harder than you think it will be. You think it'll be easy. You're like, oh, I know 7 guys, and that woman is great at marketing. She's totally going to come work with us. Like don't rely on just your own network. You're going to need to reach out to other networks. And good talent can be very expensive and very hard to attract. You want to have hyper-realistic, awesome graphics in your game. So you need an awesome artist who's maybe worked on Call of Duty. They're not going to come cheap. And they may not want to live here because it's really expensive to live here now. Or wherever you are. Say you're like, I'm going to start a game studio in Detroit. That's really cheap, but who wants to live in Detroit right now? It's a pretty tough place to live. Although Detroit is a lovely city, and I don't mean to badmouth it. The games industry can be brutal, and people know about it. So when people start researching, like, I think I want to join a games company. I'm getting out of tech and moving into games because I loved Mario when I was little. But it's really brutal. Like I worked at Telltale, I know what crunch looks like, and I know how much people can work, and I know the toll it takes on your health, your physical health, your mental health. And certainly it will take a toll on your social life and your relationships. And people understand that. People know that, and that's something you need to address when you're trying to recruit. You need to be able to share what the culture of your company is like. Like we try really hard not to have extended crunch at Double Fine. And it's something I believe in. We have a lot of people with families. I don't want people to not see their families. And treating people like human beings is something that we try and offer since we can't necessarily offer them huge buckets of money. Recruiting takes so much time. You would be surprised. So you go in, you're like, I'm an engineer, I'm an artist, I need to hire artists and engineers. because I'm the lead engineer and I'm also writing code, but I also need to like hire people. You're going to spend time reading resumes. You're going to spend time having informational phone calls. You're going to have spend time doing technical phone screens. Eventually, you're going to bring someone in on site. That's going to take another bunch of your time. Everything takes time, and it takes everyone's time because you also want that engineer to meet your artists and your producers and your management. And that means that when that person comes in for their interview, you're going to be pulling people out of work to go interview them. And say you have one position that's open and you find that you have 20 good candidates you want to talk to. So think about how much time that's going to take. You have to winnow those candidates down, you have to figure out how many there are, and you have to get them in for interviews, and then you have to convince them, if they're good, that they want to come work there, even though there's a lot of things like, preventing that from happening. So I call this like what keeps you up at night, the staffing version, because there's a lot of stuff about being a producer that will keep you up at night. So staffing can be a problem that means that you simply just won't get the game done on time. Like if you don't have enough people to build the parts for your game, it's just possible you won't get the game done. The rest of the team can get burned out covering for other people, other positions that aren't filled. So if you have one artist, and we'll talk about this in a second, if you have one artist who you don't hire right away, does other artists fill in for them? Maybe. Do they have the same skill set? Maybe, maybe not. So you kind of run into problems where people get burned out. And even though you aren't paying people because you haven't hired them yet, your overhead costs continue. So that $25,000 a month, you have that rent cost, that is a fixed cost, you're going to pay it every month, whether you have butts in seats or not. And you might need to resort to outsourcing, and that's going to cost somebody some time. So if you're working with an outsourcer, that means somebody has to somebody has to do an outsourcing contract, work with the outsourcer, bring the outsourcer's work in-house, review it, get them feedback, and coordinate that feedback with them. So that is also an additional, like, if I don't hire somebody, I have to solve this problem. Outsourcing could solve the problem, but it's going to add also to the problem. So this is kind of a hard one to see. There's enough screens. So this is my fictional group. It is my 10 developers for my 12 months. And you see that down at the bottom, it is 120 person months to build my game. And if you go to the next one, you see that that number's gone down to 113.5 because I haven't hired everybody I need to hire. So my character and prop artist, I just couldn't find one for 3 months. It took 3 months longer than I expected it to for me to bring that person on board. That meant I had an animator right down below there who had 2 months of sitting around doing nothing because there were no characters or props for him to animate. So, like that, I both didn't have somebody in the role I needed, and I had somebody sitting around doing nothing. So that was a huge waste of money. This engineer I couldn't hire. That means there were 3 engineers that were supposed to be in pre-production. That means that, I was going to have 6 person months of pre-production, and now I only have 4 because I just couldn't hire this engineer for the first part of it. And then that math is wrong, but you know what I mean. So I needed that engineer. That means that some tools probably didn't get built. And then at the end of the day, my concept and world artist, congratulations, you're going out on parental leave. The month between alpha and beta. And that's immutable. Like they're going to have a baby. Like that's what's going to happen. And you either need to figure out if somebody else can cover their work. You might have burnout. You either need to figure out if you need to outsource it. How do you do that? And how do you do that during an alpha beta period? But you end up having to solve that usually by hiring or bringing somebody else in. So hiring is something you will do throughout the project, even when you think you're done. So at the beginning of alpha, I had a whole staff. Like everybody was on staff. I'd hired everybody. I was in good shape. I didn't have to do any more interviews. And then parental leave or some, extended time off or something. And that happens all the time. Like that just is a part of being in charge of managing teams. So here's a bunch of tools that you can use for hiring, and some things that I would recommend you think about when you get out into the world and you're producing games. There are a lot of systems that you can use that will help streamline your time, where you dump all your resumes in and it helps sort through them for you, and you can put in things that find your keywords, and that way only the good ones get surfaced. So I work at a very beloved game company, like people love Double Fine. We get hundreds of resumes a week, and I am not hiring at all right now, but they all get dumped into Google Hire, and I can go through them and sort of pick for tags and keywords at some point when I am ready to do some hiring. And you can always just build your own if you're a small enough group. It's not that hard to just put Airtable or you can do it in Google Sheets. Establish interview procedures, including training your interviewers. This is one of the things I've seen small companies not do, so that this ends up being a problem if you end up hiring people that have not been properly vetted. So, one of the things I always recommend is that the hiring manager send out a note before any interview, identifying what qualities each interviewer needs to poke the interviewee about, so that you end up getting a full picture of the interviewee, rather than everybody going in and saying like, hey, what's your favorite video game? Because you want, everybody really prefers to just talk about sort of more casual questions. Establish salary ranges for positions. That's actually now, I always believe in doing it because I think it's just fair and transparent. There's actually a law in California now. And if somebody comes and applies at your company, you have to tell them what the salary range for the position is. And expect the unexpected, and not always in the good way. So, you can have a great candidate who's super excited about your game, super excited about your project, and you think they're a go, and they think that they're a go, and then Google offers them twice as much money, and that's where they go. And that stuff just happens all the time. So, expect that to happen. Don't always bank on, like, that candidate's the only candidate that we want. Some of the best practices that I've used is use one system for everybody. Don't let people go off and kind of establish their own way of hiring people. Don't have people emailing randos about your company and trying to get them in. Have that go through a pipeline so you understand who you have. Leverage all your networks, so don't just look at your friends. Look at your friends' friends. Look at organizations that have people that you think might be good candidates. Find lists online, listservs online that you can reach out to and try and get people that might be interested in. And probably the most expensive one for me for best practices is don't hire rock stars. They're difficult to work with. They only want to do one thing, and they really want you to treat them like they're special. And they might be, and that's great. And there are probably places that they're going to go and be very successful. But if you hire an eager generalist who is excited about your project and likes to work and just do lots of different things, you're going to be better off. They're going to be happier because they're going to have a lot of different opportunities to do different tasks. And you're going to be happier because they're just in it for the work and they're not in it for some kind of personal reward. All right, problem 4. You're going to miss your dates. You're somewhere through production. You're in the middle of production and you realize there is no way we're going to make our dates. This has happened on every single game I have worked on in the 15 years I've been in games. I have never worked on a game that didn't have some point where we're all like, we're fucked. We're going to miss our dates. So this is probably the most, sorry, didn't mean to swear. Didn't swear as much. Why do dates slip? There's a lot of reasons. One of the biggest ones is that, and this is really key to understanding how you can get ahead of problems like this, is something that needed to get done in pre-production didn't get done. So the tools didn't get done. There's no pipeline for getting animations in the game that got done during pre-production. That's still going to have to get built. And if you haven't built it until you're in production, that means animations can't get in your game yet. Design hasn't finished the design. So design not finishing the design in pre-production means you're putting the track down right before the train is rolling over it, and that just is really a very challenging way to create video games. And then the art direction wasn't set. I know Lee came and talked about art direction. Lee Petty wasn't here? Yeah, and if the art direction isn't set early enough, that again becomes something that's a big challenge to try and solve for later on in the game. Especially because you need your pipelines to be in place, and usually art direction is going to dictate some of those pipelines. This is the number one reason for me. Art, design, writing, and everything else just took longer than we thought it was going to. We'll talk about scoping and scheduling in a second, but that happens all the time. You'll go in and you'll realize the artists didn't feel inspired to do their concept art and needed to go to MoMA. to get some inspiration. They lost 2 days of work on a 2-week milestone. So that's not good. And that stuff happens, and it just all rolls out. So early on in the project, when you have a bunch of tasks, you have them all in the bucket. You haven't moved stuff out back to the backlog of it may never happen. When everything's in there is when you start seeing like anything slips, then something else is going to have to slip, and then the dates are going to slip. Towards the end of the project, so this is kind of like beginning is pre-production, art design writing is production, and then feature creep is what happens at the end of the game, end of production cycle when you start adding stuff in, because you're like, this could be really cool now that we have all the systems in place. I didn't even know I could build this cool thing. And feature creep happens pretty much on every project, and it's super fun because it's usually really cool features that you want to add to your game, but it also is a huge reason why dates slip. And there's millions of reasons. I mean, this is like the #1 thing about game development. If I wanted to make software that didn't slip, I would make financial software. Because financial software is going to be like 1 + 1 always equals 2. And it doesn't have to be fun, and it doesn't have to have a good user experience. It's just always going to equal 2. And that is not video game development. Because video game development needs to get to a point where it's like, this is a fun game, and I want to be playing it. So these are a quick overview of the milestones for a typical game. Even if you're doing a 5-week game, I would think about setting some of these milestones and thinking about how to use them. Pre-production is when designs, pipelines, and prototyping happens, and tools get completed. Production, you can have as many production milestones as you want in a development cycle, broken down in whatever way you want. It gives you like here's how I need to get this done in order to get that done, in order to get that done. Gives you that order so that you know how you're going to deliver the game. If you have a publishing partner, you will be required to have milestones like these, and they'll need to be stated in advance of the contract. That's something that won't be relevant for your 5-week game, but if you move into game development, that's really important. Alpha is usually, and alpha changes from every game company I've ever worked with, has a different definition of alpha, but I like to think of it as it's feature complete, so really no new features come in, but all the features that are in there start getting polished. And then beta is code and art complete, and you squash all the bugs, and you submit it. So some tools that I use for scheduling, really it's all the plans. So as the producer, you're going to be in charge of all the plans. A staffing plan, a milestone plan. I like to do a contingency plan, basically before a project starts. I drink some wine, and I think about all the bad things that can happen. And then I try and write a note to myself about like what would I do if that bad thing happened, and your budget. And you're gonna look at these all the time. They're gonna be like what you live in day to day. And there's a lot of different project planning softwares out there that you can use. You can also use Excel or Google Docs or Google Sheets. And it doesn't really matter what tool you use as long as you are organized and know where to find the information that you need. And when's the right time to do this? It is always the right time to be planning. You'll do it the entire length of the project. The bulk of the work, your day-to-day work as a producer, is going to be managing those types of schedules and just making sure that they're all up to date and that everybody knows what their responsibilities are on those schedules. And I like to add checkpoints to the schedule, so I like to have a point where I'm like, production 1 is supposed to be done now. Did we get all the things done in production 1 we were supposed to? And that way you start understanding scoping a little bit better. You can do formal sign-offs or not. If you have a publisher, you will want to do formal sign-offs. And transparency is key. I would make sure that all your stuff is published somewhere and that your team can get to it, except maybe the budget. That depends on how you like to run your team. And people should know exactly what's in their sprints and what's in their next sprints and what's in their backlog. But you should be cognizant of team morale, because there's tons of information, and sometimes it's a little depressing to think about all the stuff that you want to do that you're not going to be able to do. And you want to think about how to present that to the team. You want to celebrate your wins. You want to say, like, we got into production 1, we didn't hit every mark of production 1, but we hit these 7 and we hit them hard and they're awesome, and this is going to be a great game. And you want to be, the person that is the biggest cheerleader for the game. Alright, last problem. Your game is too big. And again, I haven't worked on a game that did not start too big. Every game starts bigger than you can possibly imagine, and that is in the land of like, no idea is a bad idea. And when you have your first brainstorm about the game, you should capture all of it. And it's really nice now because live games can continue to be updated post-ship. But if you're doing a finite project that's just going to ship, you're going to need to learn how to scope because every game is too big. And I believe they should be. It's better to start with way more design than not enough design because it's really hard to add design in later. And scoping is the single hardest job in game development, and that's for everybody. I think that every department, not just production, scoping is just a really challenging thing because you're cutting off chunks of things you care about, and that just hurts. It's just not a fun thing to do. So I like to think about how to avoid having to scope later by understanding what the estimates are. So gathering data in pre-production is a really good thing to do. So if you get your art pipeline set up during pre-production and you can tell how long it takes to make a prop, how long does it take to build the rig for that prop, how long does it take to get that prop in the game, how long does it take to get it animated, and then you say, now I have a budget. I know how long it takes to get that piece of art into the game, and I know that there's 8,000 props in my game. And then you can start doing your budget, you can start doing your project plan out of that. Establish milestones and be transparent. This is another really important one for scoping. Be clear with people that they understand what their responsibilities are, because at the end of the day, this is a team project, and everybody has to be contributing to get the milestones completed in a way that feels meaningful. And you need to share that with everybody. You want people to understand what you're trying to get done. And you want to build budgets and timelines and do roll-ups so that you understand as early as possible how long past your date you actually think you're going to go. We have one part of one of the games that we're working on right now. When we did the first real schedule that had real data back when we were in production 1, which was months ago, there was one part of the game that wasn't going to be done for 7 months after ship. That seemed bad. So we sat down and we talked about how to cut that back and try and make it fit into the schedule because we weren't going to be able to slip the date. But that was something we were able to answer early enough in production because we'd done a bunch of estimates to understand how long it was going to take. Project planning tools. So these are some of the things that you should think about using in order to have the best picture of the experience that you want to have during development and ship your game on time. You need to be able to communicate with each other. Slack is great. Using Google Suite has been really great. They're pretty low friction, low point of entry tools that anyone can use. Some kind of project tracking software. There's a lot of ones you can use. I think you guys can probably use Jira and Confluence for free or Trello for free. But even if you end up deciding you want to get the student version or a trial version, I don't think they're that expensive. I like physical stuff on the wall. So if you have a wall somewhere in somebody's apartment, sticky notes with the sprints on them, where you can actually take a note and move it when something gets done, is an extremely satisfying way for team morale to improve, because you actually physically see things happening and getting done, and I love that. And you will have meetings. I am not actually, even as a producer, I don't love meetings, but they are really a necessary evil. You want to have meetings to review things and make sure that you're on track, and sometimes just getting face-to-face is the best way to do that. And then I like to close management by walking around, and this means basically like I'll just walk around and sort of see if people need help with anything or need me to play something and give them feedback on it, or if I notice there's somebody who's looking particularly gloomy and I can talk to them. But understanding where people are having problems is part of your job, and part of the project being successful means that you're aware of what's going on and staying connected enough to the project that you see that. Okay, the deepest cuts. Who makes cuts to scope? Everybody makes cuts to scope. If you see that there's a problem and there's a bunch of stuff that isn't going to make your dates, you probably need to get everybody in a room to talk about it. If you are having to cut an entire level out of a level-based game, say you have a level-based game, it's got 10 levels, you only have time for 8, you need to figure out the 2 that are being cut. So you need your design leads in there to figure out how the narrative's going to change. You need your engineering leads in there to figure out, is there any tech that's built into that that's leveraged somewhere else that's going to go away. You need your artists in there because now maybe there's stuff that they already built that can be used somewhere else. Or maybe they get to just find out they don't have to make art for 2 more levels. But you need to come together as a group because it's going to impact, again, the vision of the game and kind of staying true to the vision of the game when you make cuts. How do you choose what to cut? I tend to choose things that don't impact the game narrative and try and stay away from that more than sort of big technical challenges. If you already have a game narrative established, changing it can be extremely taxing on your team because usually people are sort of already behind that vision. And if you have a big tech piece that needs to be cut, it's almost always going to impact the narrative. Whereas if you have narrative stuff that's going to be cut, it doesn't always impact the tech side. So I just try and look at that first. And how do you validate your decisions? That is a hard question to answer, actually. I think that, you have to look at it and understand, do you want to play this game? Do you think other people are still going to want to play this game if we cut this? If we have a 20-hour game and we have to cut 4 hours of the game, do we need to change the retail price of the game because it's no longer the style of game that could command a $60 price tag? So you have to kind of look at those things and figure that out. And then will the game still hit the quality and or fun bar? That's just a really subjective thing that you need to be asking all along the way. And if you make cuts to the game, that's the first and probably most important thing you want to ask is are we still going to hit our quality bar? And is the game still going to be as fun as we were hoping it would be if you're trying to make a fun game more than a serious game? Okay, so that's all the problems. Now it's time for the trick question. Okay, so I talked about a lot of different aspects of development and a lot of different disciplines. There was one missing, and this is the, hey, surprise, we just forgot all about this whole department. What was the department that was missing from my talk? Now, I said marketing. They were on 2 slides. Nobody? No guesses? Huh? That's it. Yeah, this is going to be the quietest game in history. Because there's no audio, there's no voice, there's no music. And I did that on purpose because that is actually a group that gets sort of forlorn and just forgotten about in game development. And it costs money. In fact, it can be quite expensive if you have a lot of voice in your game. And it's a really important one to have because music can be just so meaningful in video games. So. Well, Brutal Legend had hundreds of songs, and the licensing was incredibly Brutal Legend was a game that Double Fine made. It was like a metal game. You played a roadie, and you played a roadie in a band, and Jack Black starred in it, and it just had like every metal band from the 80s and 90s basically participated in it, and it was an insane amount of licensing. But a lot of the licensing was royalty-based, which is nice because then it sort of pushes off payments. Some of it was straight up purchase, but some of it was, things that we paid post-ship after we had some revenue coming in. I like royalty deals because then you don't pay it up front. Okay, that's it. That's the last. Minutes. Did I answer your question? Okay.
So you mentioned that you had a lot of trouble hiring people, but you also said that you have hundreds of people applying to Double Fine every week. So why is there this disconnect?
They're not qualified for the most part.
like not qualified makes sense.
So Double Fine's a really unique place because it is very creatively driven. And we use a game engine, so there's not a ton of tech problems to in the same way as if we used a custom engine. And a lot of engineers like system programming more than gameplay programming. Getting artists who understand the particularly stylized art style of Double Fine games was a challenge because it's weird. Like Psychonauts is a weird game about, you know, going in and out of people's brains, and every brain is different and it's very stylized. And you can see like, you know, Grimm's. This is one of our concept artists, but like, you know, that's a different art style. So getting folks that fit that mold has been challenging. I actually get a lot of producers who apply, but we're actually a very production light company. We only have 3 producers in the whole company. We're just not, we have enough producers for the projects we do. We're a small company, we're only 65 people. But you know, there are a lot of people who would love to come work there. So, yeah. And it's hard right now to find senior programmers. Like senior programmers can make oodles more money elsewhere. Oodles and oodles. Anybody else? Oh, there you go.
Do you have any sound people on staff? And if not, then, or I guess even if so, can you just talk about like on the average game how you go about licensing and all that other stuff?
Yeah, licensing is usually handled through the business development group. So we have a VP of business development who's kind of like my partner. He looks externally and I look internally in the company. And he handled a lot of the licensing stuff. We do have an audio team. We have a director of audio, and we have 2 sound engineers that are also that do sound design as well. And then we have a voice director who's Tim Schaefer, who's the head of Double Fine, has worked with since his LucasArts days. And she is amazing, but she always just will drop what she's doing to work with us, even though she just works as a contractor. We have a lot of contractors that we work with that have just worked with us for a long time. Like Lee's game, the contractor he works with, we've used for a number of projects. Peter McConnell, who's the musician who's going to be scoring Psychonauts 2, has worked with Tim for a number of products. I usually do those contracts. So, like, I sat down with Peter McConnell at the beginning of the project, and you know, he pitched me like what he wanted to make and how much was going to be ensemble versus orchestral, and we put together a budget and figured out, and then he goes out and finds an orchestra within that budget. So, and then, you know, everybody has different licensing and royalty deals pretty much. I'm really glad I wasn't on Brutal, because that licensing just sounded terrible. It just sounded like so much work.
Okay, thank you again so much. Okay, so now for the remaining 5 minutes, this is a time to reflect. We have been thinking a lot about our project coming up, the final project, but I think this is a good moment for our big question to look back on a project you've already done. And this is a project, think of a project that you would have done perhaps a little differently from what you've learned over the course of this course. Or if you're not in CS146, then think about a project that you would have done differently in a prior course. And the question for you is what you would have done differently for this project. So you can speak to what I mentioned regarding the first success. You could speak towards what was mentioned today regarding milestoning, scoping, overcoming interpersonal issues. Any of that's fair game. Just take a project that you've done before that maybe could have gone a little better or a little differently, and tell us what you would have done differently from a production standpoint on this project. We'll be around after class if you guys have questions. I'm sure Caryl will also be here to answer any questions if you have follow-ups with her.